Hello, thank you all for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here today. I'm actually going to talk about something a little different than what y'all are used to hearing from Adara. I'm not going to talk about new technology that's being built or maybe new data that we're starting to work with, but I'm going to talk about something that's fundamental to what our speakers from Google and Miles and Expedia have been talking about today. And that is actually the productization of trust in what today is actually somewhat of an untrusting world when we talk about the digital space. And so as Leroy was talking about earlier, we're really in this exciting place as tourism marketers in that we have more data at our fingertips than we've ever had access to before. And even beyond that, the speed at which we can utilize it and which it's being generated is actually unparalleled. And so what has this done? And we've heard a lot of examples of this today. What it's done is allowed the modern marketer to be both proactive and personalized in the engagement that we have with consumers in the marketplace. And so really, essentially, we've flipped the traditional brand and consumer relationship on its head. So where consumers used to have to go and seek out information about a destination or a hotel or an activity while they were in market, now we're able to, in a meaningful way, in the spaces which they're looking to engage with us, serve them this conversation that's personalized and relevant to them. And we can only do this if we have this relationship with the consumer that we're able to give and share that data with them, and that's built upon trust. And that's why the productization of trust is actually something that we in the tourism industry, and especially us at Adara, we talk about on a regular basis. Because without this productization of trust, without the trust that we build with our travelers, we aren't going to be able to continue to grow with a lot of the new technologies in the digital space that we have today. So really, it's nothing new when we look at new technology in the advertising space. If we look back to the TV, consumers were worried that the TV was maybe someone was on the other side watching them, so they were afraid to walk in front of it. Or bringing the computer into their home and creating an email address. That was very foreign, and there was a lot of apprehension with it. And for some consumers, this limitless digital economy which we're working in is something that they are meeting with a little bit of a feeling of overexposure. So while, for example, me, when I book my winter vacation to come down here from Chicago and thaw out for a little bit, I love that I get ads telling me about activities and things to do. Or maybe when you go into your hotel room, you love that conveniently your favorite bottle of wine sitting on the table with some restaurant recommendations that, as much as you might hate to admit it, are ones that you're actually very interested in trying. And so while you may love that, for some consumers, it gives them this feeling of being watched. And honestly, who likes to feel like they're being watched? And so that's something that we need to make sure that there's this duality when we're building out new technologies and new communication in the digital space, that we're also thinking about how we can build that trust with our travelers. And unfortunately, driven by this goal and this idea that there's the revenue to be had with building consumer loyalty and with engaging with consumers in this meaningful way, a lot of businesses have actually made the choice to use consumer data without their permission, or to use it in ways that consumers maybe didn't give them the approval to do. And beyond that, actually the monetization of third-party consumer data has become commonplace. And this is really a mistake that marketers are making, because what it's actually doing is creating what we're hoping to be a personalized engagement. We're actually creating something that seems unauthentic. And as Cesar mentioned earlier, consumers are demanding that we engage with them in a customized and personal way and in spaces that they're looking for. And so building this foundation of trust is really key for us as tourism marketers. And when we look at it beyond even more, and we talk about tourism specifically, and we talk about all of us sitting here in the room, and we talk about St. Pete-Clearwater and our attractions and restaurants and hotels, we actually really need this consumer data. And because the tourism product, when we look at the decision-making process that consumers make to buy the product, the ultimate experience, it's very multidimensional and it's very personal to them. And so in the tourism industry, we're actually acutely overexposed to this concept of trust that we have to build with our consumers. And this week in Skift, there was an article and they were talking about the fact that 87% of travelers are somewhat more likely or significantly more likely to buy from a website or a travel app that has a customized experience for them. So just like when Nate and a while ago we were hearing from Expedia, we're talking about the importance of being there and engaging with them in this mobile space and being customized with them. That's actually consumers and travelers are willing to not do business with ones that aren't customized and that they can't trust. Simply put, the opportunity cost of distrust is way too high. So it was interesting, Frost & Sullivan did a study, and what they did is they asked brands to rate themselves on a scale of 0 to 100, being fully trust, on how much they thought consumers trusted them. And they asked consumers to do the opposite. And what was interesting is that there was a significant gap in their perception and consumers' perceptions. And when you take into account that 7 in 10 consumers will actually boycott a brand that they feel they cannot trust, the opportunity cost is really, it's too high. And so what this really means for all of us and for St. Pete-Clearwater is that when we continue to grow, and especially as the travel industry here in St. Pete, and we've heard a lot of what y'all are doing in the marketplace today, they're being leaders and frontiers in this digital space, you can't afford to not think about trust. And earlier, when David asked, what are the things that you think about for the next year, Red Tide came up a lot. And when we look at opportunities like that, where you have the opportunity to build trust with your travelers, if you lose trust in those moments, you'll never get it back. And so that's really a key component of building that relationship and driving travel. And so at Adara, when we look at our components of productizing trust, it's really something that any organization or any destination can do. It's really leaning on the reliability, transparency, and collaborative values. So really, it's something that's quite simple that we all can't afford to not do. And so when we look at the future of digital advertising and technology in the digital space, all of it's built upon this foundation of trust and consumer data. And so in essence, as a travel and tourism industry, when we talk about growing how we're engaging with consumers and how we're customizing those experiences with our travelers, we really can't afford to also not be productizing trust at the same time. So thank you.
Andrea, thank you.
Yeah.
Two things. One real quick is, so if you're on a site and it's free, or if you're doing something and it's free to you, you are the product, correct?
Yeah.
So there's no such thing as free, really.
No.
When you're on a site, you're giving something. That's one thing in Adara, but I'm going to go backwards for a minute. I think it's much spookier. I think the voice control devices are much spookier because it's not just your behavior, it's your voice. Whether you know this or not, if you're using a home device, many of them actually make an MP5 out of what you're saying and is stored. You can open up the app and you can listen to yourself talk back to that machine. So this is just a bit spooky to me. One big question for you,
Yeah.
someone gave it to us. As a digital marketer, as in this room, how do we trust any of this stuff? Trust is a big thing, but where do we start?
You have to do your research. If you're using data from any data source, or if you're actually making any of your data available, you need to make sure that you're having that open dialogue with the other end, so maybe the other B2B in which you're working to use that data with. And then also with the consumer, especially with GDPR, we saw that, especially in the destination space, I was really taken aback at the steps that destinations were making to ensure that they were making the information about their privacy policies front and center. And so being really transparent with the consumer as well is something that really can help to benefit with that.
Transparency, there it is.
Yeah.
Andrea, thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.